off and on. But let's go ahead and get started. My name is Byron McMillan. I'm here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this is my co-creator of the course, Bill Clark, coming at us from Seattle, Washington. So a bunch of Westerners out here today. But welcome. We're glad you're all here. But I just want to start off with saying, as Father Rohr talked about the other day, about one of the problems with so much of our religion over the past 2,000 years is the emphasis on punishment and blame and shame versus healing. And so what we want you guys to know straight off from the beginning is that this is a course about healing. And we want to heal the wounds of America that have been caused through the ideology of white supremacy. And, you know, a lot of people aren't real comfortable with that phrase, as Joel Blunt talked about last night. You know, it took him a long time before he could even say those words, you know, white supremacy, because they're so charged. But one of the things we want to do here is help us to recognize that, one, we have a problem. And so I want to use the acronym RAIN, R-A-I-N, you know, to really kind of guide us in this. And it's just like this problem of white supremacy is really, it's an addiction. And any addict in search of recovery has to start off with recognizing that he has a problem. He or she has a problem. And so that's what we want to do. And so the first letter in that acronym is R, and that's for recognize. You know, recognize white supremacy as a real thing and how it has impacted our culture and everything that we do. The second letter is A, and that's allow. And so we want to allow the reality of that truth to set in and, you know, not push it away, not try to disavow it, but say, hey, it's a real thing, and we just allow it. We just have to sit in it. We have to recognize it, and then we allow it. And then the third letter is I, and that's investigate. And so we need to investigate where it came from, what were its beginnings, why did our nation grow along those lines with that as a foundation. And then the last part is nurture, and this is where the healing comes in. We've got to nurture each other. We've got to nurture ourselves on this journey. We can't blame and criticize and just yell at one another and call each other racist or, you know, being insensitive or whatever. We've got to understand that we need healing, and we've got to nurture one another. And so that's what this course is all about. And in a minute, Bill's going to start off with helping us to really recognize this issue of white supremacy that we have. And the first way that we really do this throughout the course is to engage in history or a historical perspective from the margins, from people of color, who we don't typically hear history from, the historical narrative from in our schools. Most of us aren't taught that. I wasn't taught that. Even as a Black man, I was not taught that in the schools that I went to. And so Bill's going to really walk us through that. And then we'll go into the other elements as we go along. But first off, Bill, you know, I think you got a poem for us to start off and some good historical understanding of this ideology of white supremacy that you're going to talk about for a little bit. So, Bill.
All right. Thanks, Byron. Okay, brothers.
Oh, one thing. Make sure if you want to maximize Bill's presentation, just double click on your screen, double click on the his presentation, and it'll expand in your box. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So, brothers, it's been quite a day already. You've been in council. You've heard Jewel you've been wandering, and we appreciate, Byron and I, that you're here now for this session. And so may it be a beautiful time, a holy time, a sacred time. And for those new to Illuman, you've been hearing a lot of poetry, and so I'm gonna keep going. And this is what are called sorrow songs. Sorrow songs are part of the Negro spiritual tradition that have come from our Black brothers and sisters, birthed during the slavery era. We often start our council with one of the sorrow songs. So this is recorded by W.E.B. Du Bois in the first half of the 20th century. He was one of the most famous Black Americans and one of America's leading intellectuals. He left quite a heritage. So here's this one. I walked through the churchyard to lay this body down. I know the moon rise. I know the star rise. I walk in the moonlight. I walk in the starlight. I'll lie in the grave and stretch out my arms. I'll go to judgment in the evening of the day. And my soul and thy soul shall meet that day when I lay this body down. We're going to be hearing from Black and Indigenous voices. When Byron and I talk in the future tense, for those of you who are just joining us, this is a preview. The session is a preview to our 8-month deep dive into the history of America from the margins. And at the top of the chat is the registration to our course. We did 1.0 last year and 2.0. Now it's been revised, and it's an honor to offer that course together. And you are all very welcome. So part of the session is Byron and I welcoming you all to take this journey with us. It'll be the second Tuesday in November. You all know what the first Tuesday in November is, right? So we might need to be together in council. I want to read you some words from an Indigenous sister named Brooke Prentice. She came from Australia. She's Aborigine. And for those of you who were able to make the Zoom call with Miriam, who led us yesterday afternoon, there was an Indigenous sister from Australia. And so Brooke is part of that tradition. Here's what she wrote when she visited our nation. As I stood barefoot and connected with your land, I was troubled. I felt the same disturbance pulse from the land as when I do this in Australia. I could feel the land was unsettled. I could hear the land weeping and screaming. I could see the land was tired. These are the deep wounds of colonization, dispossession, and racism, a true history that has not been dealt with. The healing of deep wounds require humbleness, prayer, and action, and a willingness to challenge the narrative of the American story, the American dream. We need a new story that includes all of us, all of us. A story that doesn't center around white people We're part of the mix. We're 63. White folks are 63% of the American population. We're in there, but we've been centered for too long. So I ask this question, outsource. For those of us who are white, we've been hearing about this there, and you've been doing it this weekend. Thank you. There's unique soul work for us to do that we cannot outsource. We cannot deny it's there, delay it until a more convenient time, or we can say my time is now. Some of this work is yours to do alone, but some is done with your brothers and sisters in council, around kitchen tables, in coffee shops, when that's safe to go there. One of the things that the pandemic has closed down that I miss so terribly is in Seattle. We had in one of our brothers, once a month, we gathered around a beautiful long kitchen table, had some homemade soup, and just went around and talked just like we're doing now. We had prompts and went around and talked about what we were learning. And we had women there joining us. So this is not a gender specific journey, though the course is for us brothers. Maybe you're going to start something in your own living room for men and women together. So the question we're asking is getting to a new we. And for too long, we've only had history in this nation that is centered white folks. It's what Byron talks about when he tells his story. Sorry, bro, for getting into your story, but it's made such an impact on me. So you'll hear more from him later. But I need Black, African American heroes. And I'm getting them. I need Indigenous heroes. And I'm learning and growing by reading, going places, meeting people, getting to this new we. It's not easy. It takes a lot of intentionality, because the default in this country on TV, media, our own friendship networks are meeting with people that, for the most part, look like us. And so that's what we're pushing back on. We need to break out and find a common memory that, for me as a white brother, includes history of Indigenous peoples, includes history of Black Americans, includes Latino stories and history. George Erasmus from Canada, a fellow activist, writes, "Where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no community." So that's what we're building here, brothers. We're building a new history so we can build a new and the history is just in covering it. It's when, in that RAIN acronym that Byron shared at the beginning, this is the investigation. And you are going to help us. We did 1.0 last year, as we mentioned. The brothers in that course, some of whom will be council carriers in the second 2.0, they helped us build this course with the resources that they brought, and we're so grateful for that. So as we get these new resources,
Hey, Bill,
we take.
Yeah, one of the brothers
bro.
said that his session froze. I'm not sure if it's just his. Can other people? Are you guys seeing everything okay right now? If you can, just say yes or give a thumbs up. Okay. Andy says it's still alive. Okay. Keep going. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So this whole thing of taking ownership of my brother's story, Byron, I don't mean to put you on the spot, bro, but I'm learning to take ownership of your story. And your story moves me very deeply. And maybe you're taking some ownership of my story.
Absolutely am.
On a personal level. And then I want to know about Byron's ancestors. And he's talking about them. His dad graduating from one of our historic African-American colleges that we heard about a bit from Joel. And Byron, you have other kinfolk who graduated from Howard.
Yep.
One of our flagship
Sure did.
African-American colleges. And yeah. So it's taking ownership. One of the brothers that we're both getting to know from New Mexico, Arizona, from the Navajo reservation is Mark Charles. And Mark will figure prominently in our first council in November, on into December. But Mark he's a product of his dad was in forced boarding schools. We'll go into this more later in the councils to come. But we have a very tragic history of government sponsored taking children away from their parents, indigenous children, and forcing them to assimilate to white culture in boarding schools that were brutal, absolutely brutal. And that's Mark's father's story. He married a Dutch American woman, and Mark's story is reclaiming his Navajo heritage. He's a UCLA graduate, and he talks about moving back and spending 10 years back on the reservation. And it's all, the Navajo reservation is around the Four Corners. So it's mostly in Arizona, but it hits New Mexico, Colorado as well. And so he's also, by the way, running for president. So if you want to Google Mark Charles, and Byron, maybe you could put that into the chat.
Okay, what? The information about Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just maybe even Mark Charles' name and maybe something like president or something. Or Hogan. Hogan is the name of his website. Mark introduces what's called the doctrine of discovery. And this forms, in many ways, the theoretical foundation for our class, our course, because it speaks to the larger macro question of what prepared our white ancestors in 1619 to buy human beings. To think that it was okay that you could, with corn or tobacco or English currency, whatever they were using in the early 17th century, that you could buy human beings. It's a devastatingly bleak history, part of our nation's foundation. Because of the doctrine of discovery, this is what gave white ancestors the permission to take indigenous land. To think that they could swap some beads and an axe and rum for thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of land on the East Coast. So this is part of staying at the table, brothers, long enough to learn this history. (1452). This history came out of the Catholic Church, but the Protestant colonial nations, England and the Netherlands, the Dutch in particular, they were the two colonials that came to the eastern seaboard, and they very much followed in this. Let's listen to these verbs from Pope Nicholas V. To invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ, wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, all movable and immovable goods. When you see movable, think gold. Whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. Right there, that's the mandate that our ancestors followed, first with indigenous Americans, and then later with kidnapped Africans. So if you take this journey with us, we're going to together reframe our nation's history. And we're going to use 1619 as this crucial starting point. 1619 is when English pirates captured from the Portuguese somewhere around 40 to 50 kidnapped Africans in the Gulf of Veracruz in Mexico, in that Gulf that borders Texas, Louisiana, the Gulf, our Gulf coast down there, Florida. And they captured them through a sea battle, took them north to Virginia, and sold them at a place called Point Comfort. And Byron can speak to Point Comfort. So we're gonna follow that trail. We're gonna use Nicole Hannah-Jones from the New York Times, the key author to the 1619 project. So you'll all get a PDF copy of this. It'll be in the course packet, and something like 40 different African American contributors, poets, scholars, journalists contributed to the 1619 project. And so we want to see that voyage, the voyage of the White Lion, become part of our nation's history. We talk about the Columbus's 1492 trip, and then later the Pilgrims arriving at Plymouth Rock in 1620. Those are the prioritized in our nation's history. We're going to get the White Lion in there, brothers, because it's at least as crucial as these other two. And so here's a slide that shows where that battle took place, and then the White Lion going on up into Virginia. So over the centuries, from the 1600s, from 1619 until 1865, it was part of the largest forced migration in human history. 12 million, brothers, Africans, were sold into slavery. And only, interestingly enough, only about 500,000 came to America. So the rest of those large figures came to the Caribbean and Brazil. So from 500,000, the African American population of the US is somewhere around 35, 40 million, 13% of our nation. Okay, there's the white lion. So we heard earlier when Joel said you have to go back about 500 years before there were before there were white people. Right? There were Europeans, but there weren't. And there weren't black people either. There were Africans who were part of incredible empires called the Congo, the Dahomey, the Yoruba, the Benin, the Asante. We need to learn these histories. So how does this phrase set with you? How Africans became black by Europeans made white. So we're talking about here the kidnapped Africans just a few months earlier, before that famous first group in 1619. They had families, farms, lives, and dreams. They had names, but the enslavers did not bother to record their names. They had been made black by those people who believed they were white. And where they were headed, black equaled slave. Slavery in America required turning human beings into property and stripping them of every element that made them individuals. This is what's called chattel slavery. So if you're not familiar with chattel slavery, it was permanent. Generations, over 250 years, from 1619 to 1865. That's how long? Slavery. We're not even talking about Jim Crow. Black people weren't recognized as human beings, but property that could be mortgaged, traded, bought, sold, used as collateral, given as gifts, or disposed of violently. Enslaved people could not legally marry, had no legal rights to their children, who could be bought or sold at will. They were barred from law, from learning to read. Their owners could rape and kill their slaves without consequences. They could earn nothing, will nothing, and inherit nothing. Byron, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I have a lot more to say,
you
brothers,
got
but
days,
I'm thinking I should,
days worth of material, no doubt.
I should end it here, but it's just a taste, guys. It's just a taste. We'll be doing this work together. You'll be reading all the material where I get my information is available to you all. It's not hidden. It's not esoteric. It's not hard to understand. But it's soul work. The work I've had to do to get ready for you all it's soul work, and I'm willing to do it for you. I'm willing to do it so we can have a national conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things we found that the stuff that Bill pulls out is just just infinite. I've been just surprised at how much information is really out there in podcasts, in music, in the film industry. And one of the things that we got from the brothers who went through the first course is they started bringing in all kinds of resources as well. And so that's another thing that we do throughout the course. We share the resources that we find as we're going through it. And this just goes back to this historical narrative coming from people of color, the margins. And, to be quite honest, so much of this is new to me as well. I'm a 54-year-old man. I know I don't look it most of the time, but if you see my hair, see how old I'm an old man. But a handsome old man. I like
handsome
that.
Old man.
But yeah, for most of my life, I was not aware of all of this, and I did not recognize it myself. And so part of my story is, so I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1966. My parents met and fell in love at North Carolina A&T University, where Jesse Jackson and other civil rights leaders were, sitting down at lunch, Woolworth's pharmacy counters, ordering lunch and getting arrested. And so the year after I was born, in 1966, we moved to Raleigh. We moved to Jackson, Michigan, and it's only been about the last 6 or 7 years that I realized that we were a part of what is known as the Great Migration, where African American families, 6 million African American people, moved out of the Jim Crow South to try and find a better life up in the North. And I lived there for 9 years of my life. And race really wasn't an issue for me growing up. We were sheltered from it. We lived in an all-white community out in the suburbs of Jackson, Michigan. And my parents did a really good job of just keeping us sheltered from a lot of the turmoil that was going on. And we just felt love. We were secure. We never missed a meal. We had everything we needed. And it was a really good childhood. And when I was 10 years old, we moved back to Raleigh, North Carolina, which was still in the shadow of the Jim Crow South. This was just 1976 that I moved back. And I remember the first day of school, again, we moved into the all-white suburbs, and there was a brand new elementary school right down the street from my house. And I walked to the elementary school with my white friends. And at the same time, they were busing in black kids from the inner city of Raleigh, which was mostly black, poor, and urban. And a whole separate school system had sprouted up. You had Raleigh Public School System, which was inner city black, and then you had the Wake County Public School System, which was mostly white and suburban. And so that's where we moved. And I remember the kids coming in from the inner city, and they looked at me and they were like, "Who do you think you are? You think you're better than us, talking white, dressing white. Who do you think you are, Mr. Uncle Tom, Mr. Whitey Black," and all this. So I was like, wow, I don't fit. And I remember as a 10-year-old kid making the commitment to doing whatever it took to fit into white dominant culture. Of course, I didn't have those words at the time, but I realized, hey, I need to dress right. I need to talk right. I need to have things in order so that I can be accepted. And that's what I began to do. In 1965, Lyndon Baines Johnson gave an address at Howard University, historical black college, probably the most preeminent black college. 3 of my uncles and aunts went there and did really well. But it's a historical black college. And in 1965, Lyndon Johnson went there and gave a speech saying that the most important thing that we could do in America right now is to assimilate black people into American culture. And so you fast forward to that 40 years to today, and we know that what he called American culture was actually white dominant culture. It was white supremacist culture that had as its main thinking that white is right. And so when Richard Rohr was talking the other night, he was talking about how in patriarchy, might makes right. In racism and white supremacy, it's white makes right. And I bought into that. And so what came with that is a lot of internalized oppression. And I didn't realize this. I didn't want to be black. I thought there was something that was wrong with me because of the color of my skin, and I thought I had to overcome it. And so this is how a lot of Black Americans have navigated America, and it was really problematic. And for me, it's something that has taken me decades to get over and overcome. And so, yeah, I see over here, Lee, you're asking, when did Jim Crow end? When I moved to Raleigh in 1976, there literally was a billboard out on I-40 in Johnson County that said, I remember seeing this coming in, it said, "Welcome to Klan Country." And so here's a 10-year-old boy moving from the north, and I see this sign that says, "Welcome to Klan Country." In 1979, 5 people were killed in Greensboro, North Carolina at a Klan rally protest. The Klan just, very similar to Charlottesville, and they came out and 5 people were killed. And you're like, that was 1979. And there are still what they call sundown laws on the books in North Carolina. There are places that literally still have it in the laws that if you're Black and you're in that town, you could not be out after sunset. Still on the books. I have a friend in Virginia Beach, Hampton, Virginia. I lived in Hampton and Virginia Beach for 3 years. But him and a friend bought a bowling. They were trying to buy a bowling alley in Hampton, Virginia. This is 2 years ago. And they were a nonprofit working with under-resourced kids in Hampton. They tried to buy a bowling alley. And before they could get through it, on the books was a law that said it was illegal for Black people to own property in that part of Hampton. This is 2 years ago. It was still on the books. Now, of course, they had to go back and, that was made illegal, but it was still on the books in Hampton, Virginia in 2018. And so, and I haven't talked about this much, but I wrote an article that said Donald Trump is the most important president in America that we've had. And the point that I was trying to make is that Donald Trump showed us what America really is based upon. He has shown us the reality of the foundation of white supremacy on the policies of our country, and they are still lasting and enduring through today. And so there are, we see it everywhere, and that's really what not the argument, but it's what the main conversation in America is right now. And one of the things I just want people to know, if Donald Trump doesn't win the presidency, again, the problem is not solved. The problem is not solved because Donald Trump just revealed what America is. And that is what we have to deal with. There are people, and so we've talked about it all weekend, this idea of white supremacy, that white is right, is very prevalent. It's prevalent among Black people. It's prevalent among immigrants that have moved here and just are like, well, why can't Black people just get their shit together and be successful like me? I'm Vietnamese, or I'm Asian of some descent, or I've come from Latin America. And there's enough people in America that have found a measure of success to think that it's an anomaly for the rest of America that is falling into a hole every day. I mean, even white people. And just another example of this idea of white supremacy and how it's marketed. The welfare is marketed as a Black and brown issue. Hey, all these Black people and Latino people on welfare. The reality of the matter is there's more white people on welfare by far, and that are falling through the cracks and can't make it. But that's not the face of welfare. And that's just that's how white supremacy works. It pits poor Black, brown, white people against each other. And it makes white people feel, hey, well, I may be poor, but at least I'm white and I've got some advantage. And Donald Trump has spoken to that very clearly and caused a lot of problems. But this is what we're reckoning with right now. And so that's what this course is about. And so as Bill shared, you know, the historical narrative, that's a huge part of the course, helping us to see what America actually is. And it's not, again, it's not to make people feel shame. It's not to blame people. It's not to say it's bad to be white. It is not. I've had more benevolent white people in my life than I can even think about. I mean, my life has been full of benevolent white people who have loved me and helped me to succeed. But they haven't helped a lot of black people and brown people in general, just me. And that's one of the things. I assimilated. I made myself comfortable to white people. And I've always done that. And it's only been about the past 5 to 8 years that I've started pulling away from that. Well, not pulling away from it, but really speaking my heart and speaking my mind. And a lot of people have said, you know, well, what's wrong with you, Byron? When did you get so angry? When did you get so uppity, I guess? And it's like, dude, I'm not angry. I'm not uppity. I'm just sharing the truth of what I know now. And some people just can't handle it. And so this course, seeing the history, that's the key component of it. But then the other component of it is engaging in the way of counsel. Brothers sitting in a circle, sharing their brokenness, sharing their pain, sharing how they've interacted with race through their lives, and doing it in a safe environment where nobody will judge them. And that's one of the powers of, you know, Illuman and the way of counsel. We can share all our brokenness, we can share all of our shit, and nobody's trying to fix us. And we realize we fix ourselves just by being a part of it. And so we use counsel. That's you know, that's why Illuman is so important. And then we're going to use a lot of ritual that helps us to identify trauma that's trapped in our body. One of the books that we focus a lot on is Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands. And he talks about how, you know, for 500 years, white Europeans were engaged in the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages. It was a very brutal time. It was a very oppressive time. A lot of people didn't have rights and they were brutalized, they were tortured. And what he shows is that this trauma got trapped in the body of white Europeans who then came over to America and started America. And they didn't deal with that trauma that was trapped in their body. And as our brother Richard Rohr always is saying, you know, the pain that you don't transform, you transmit. And so all this pain from white Europeans who came over here began to create laws and built a nation on a foundation of trauma and pain that was locked inside of white people's bodies. And he says we have to learn to deal with that today. It's not only the trauma, as Joel talked about yesterday, having compassion for, and Richard talked about African Americans and immigrants having trauma and suffering through PTSD. They're not the only ones that have to be healed from that. White people who have inflicted it, white people who have had that trauma passed down in their DNA to them, they have to deal with it. I have to deal with trauma that came from my ancestors as well. And so we engage in ritual that helps us identify that trauma that's in our body and begin to exercise it out. So we engage in counsel and we engage in ritual. And then we also do a lot of journaling. We'll use a book from, it's called Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. And it helps us to do personal journaling, which helps us bring the truth out of our own story and our own experience and begin to work on that. And then we also have a section where we begin to share some of our journaling with each other. And so we can have collective healing through our journaling. So those are some of the key parts of the course: the historical narrative, the way of counsel, ritual, and journaling. And so someone asked, will the course be recorded? Yes, every live session will be recorded, and every brother will be put into a small group with a counsel carrier that you will go through the course with. And you'll be able to, the platform, the learning platform that we're going to be using is called Sutra, and it'll allow us to carry on conversations outside of the main sessions. And so that's a little bit of how the course is set up. And again, you know, sharing our stories, like Bill talked about owning part of my story, you know, and I own his story. That's what we do. That's what brothers do for each other. That's why Illuman is so powerful. I have so many brothers, and I see many of you on the screen. There was many yesterday. I have so many brothers within Illuman who I can sit down and talk honestly with, and it's helped me to heal. You know, my vulnerability with other brothers who are being vulnerable has helped me to heal, and I see other brothers healing, and I realize how incredible that really is. Russell, you said, will the councils also be on Tuesdays, or will some happen at other times? Yeah, the councils will be a part of the 1.5-hour sessions that we have every Tuesday. Bill will go over an overview at the beginning, and we'll have some poetry or some kind of reading up front. Bill will do an overview of his historical presentation each week, and then we'll do some ritual in that 1.5 hours, and then most of the sessions will be in council with prompts that we will use from the book Me and White Supremacy. So there's Bill showing it right there. But yeah, we're really excited. Jose, you can't see any brothers on the screen. You know, all you can do is see the chat. The only people you can see on the screen are me and Bill. So yeah, that's really what we've got going on, and we're going to open it up to questions now, and questions are starting to roll in. But this is a personal journey. Everybody shares, and we get shoulder to shoulder, and we get honest about, you know, how race has impacted our lives, and we see an alternative narrative of race in America, and we don't shy away from it. And we think as we go through, or we know, because there were 15 brothers that went through the first Liberty and Justice for All course. And they are some of my closest brothers to this day, because the stuff we talked about, it just brought us together. And we didn't blame or shoot each other or, you know, condemn one another. We just realized we're all caught up in this aspect of American life, and we all need healing, and our healing resides in each other. So yeah, Bill, you want to, I know we kind of got way off script here, but that's
No, it's excellent. I just wanted to say, Eric, thank you. You pointed us towards an Atlantic article about the use of the term America. You put that in the chat. So I wanted to say thank you. And that's like a case study of how this course gets built. So now Byron and I have that. We will have that article. We will look at it. We'll look at the term America as a problematic term for especially our Latino brothers and sisters, and then what we as majority culture folk, what we need to learn about that term. And so it's brick by brick.
Yeah, and so one of the brothers, I lost it, and the question kind of rolled up, but we're hoping to get about 100 participants in this session, so we can handle as many as come in. I'm sure there will be a cutoff point, but we think we'll be able to handle 100 plus, and then break down into small groups. We have about 20 brothers that have agreed to be counsel carriers, And so those councils will hold between 6 to 8 people. So with 20, if we got, we could have up to 200, 190 people could come in. The course costs $200, but it's also going to be on the gift economy. And so if you can afford to pay more, pay more. If you can only afford to pay less, pay less. Pay whatever you can. If you can pay for another brother or add something to a pot to help others, do that. So we're gonna leave it as a gift economy. Yeah. So it says, how do we get more info on the course? At the top of the chat section is a registration link with information on the course, and it gives you everything you need to be able to sign up for it right now.
So we're not embarrassed, guys, about wanting to be part of a movement. And this movement of kitchen table, round table conversations about race in America. It's not just Illuman. We're just a tiny little piece. Other churches and synagogues, mosques, secular folk, people of all different backgrounds are realizing that part of the trouble that we've gotten into as a nation has been the refusal to face our nation's racial past. And we're saying that stops with us. So Byron, I think it's a very manly thing in terms of healthy masculinity to do
it
this.
Is manly work. It is the most manly work you can do. And one of the things I learned at my MROP, I've always been accepting of my gay brothers and sisters in the world all my life. Because as a black man in the South, whenever I went somewhere, I always felt, hey, if gay people were there, I'm like, okay, as a black man, I guess I'm okay here. So I had like a tolerance all my life for gay and lesbian people. But it wasn't until I sat in a council with in my MROP, in my small group, I had a gay man leading it and a gay man in there with me in the small group. And as I heard their story, I fell in love with those brothers, and I realized that they're just as manly as I am, and more manly than I would ever be. And I love them and I embrace them wholeheartedly. And to this day, I've met. And so when we talk about manliness and masculinity, I was a jock, I was a sports guy, superstar, whatever. And I had like a tolerance, I said, of gay people. And I felt like gay people weren't really manly. And now, listening to their story, doing this work in Illuman, I realized how wrong I was. And we feel this is the same thing with race. As we get to recognize and understand and listen to one another, we realize that it doesn't matter what your gender is, it doesn't matter what your race, your class, your socioeconomic status, whatever. We're all human beings and we all need each other. And that's what this course is really about. I don't want it to get into just black and white and even Native American. It's what does it mean to be human, and how do we learn to love and accept each other and benefit from each of our humanity. And that is what Illuman is about. And that is why we can't sit on the sidelines and just get a few rituals and do a few practices and then go on about our life as normal. We have to change the world that we're living in. And we think this course is going to help us co-create a world together as we deal with our own shit and our own brokenness. And as we begin talking and sharing and listening to each other, a new way will arise out of that. It's going to take time, but it's going to take brothers who are whole and healed to be able to do that. And that's what Illuman is helping us to do. And Bill and I are just so grateful for Illuman standing up and not just putting out a statement, a beautiful statement against racism, but they say, hey, here, we're going to offer this course. we're going to encourage others to get into this issue and create a new world. That's what we have to do. That's what Illuman is all about, and that's why we're glad to be here with you guys.
If I could just jump in, Ronald's got a great question on talking about the problem. Ronald, that in many ways, that's not, we're digging. This is archaeology. This is getting to the fundamental roots, because we're becoming informed brothers through this course, through our exploration. And one of the reasons we are doing ritual is to get it into our souls with the end result. Byron keeps talking about this. I love it. He holds my feet to the fire. It's personal transformation. And then we go into the world as transformed men to take our place in Albuquerque, in Seattle, in Dallas, in Raleigh, in New York, in Richmond. We take our place and we join what Spirit is doing in those places. And maybe we'll be initiators. Maybe we'll start initiatives. Maybe there'll be some things that Illuman Brothers can do collectively. So it's all very organic. And so it's like, come join us and see what
and
Spirit
as you get
does
in, and as this information, as you become transformed, you begin to try and transform your world. One of the brothers in the first course, he's a city planner. No, he's a city developer, and now he is meeting and he is engaged in his city development work in a very different way because of this course. He's like, he sees his city differently than he did before. He sees the problems. He sees redlining in the communities and how, all the Jim Crow rules and laws have impacted where people live and how they live. And so he's begun to incorporate what he's learned into his everyday work. And that's what we're going to have to do. We're all going to have to learn how to engage our world in our own way, based upon the gifts and abilities and resources and networks that God has given us, or that universe has given us. And there's no A, B, or C, D. This is what you got to do. We're all going to do different things based upon our gifts, talent, our stations in life, and our networks. And so, yeah, Ron, that's what it's going to take. And to Angel's question or statement, and I think I tried to answer this, and this is not a black and white thing. Racism is not black and white. It's what it means to be a human being, and it takes all of us. Anybody that's being oppressed for any reason anywhere is who we need to be standing up for. That is the work that we do. That is what Illuman must do, and that's what we do for each other. And I know we're out of time. We're like right at 3:01, and like I always joke about this a lot with Bill and everybody else, all you white guys. I know you like to be on time, so I don't want to see. I'd run this meeting to like 3:20, 3:30, and wouldn't think anything about it. But I know it drives a lot of you guys, especially you religious, you Presbyterian guys, you like to be on time a lot. But hey, I'm just kidding. But we're at the top of the hour, and to Ron's question about action, I want to end with this poem by Howard Thurman, a black theologian and a mystical theologian, and it's about wholeness. And this is how it goes. It says, "Thou art made for wholeness, body, mind, spirit, one creative synthesis, moving in perfect harmony within and without, with fellow man and nature all around, to make heaven where hell is found." To make heaven where hell is found. So that's the action. Wherever we go and wherever we see hell on earth, our job as recovered brothers as initiated brothers, as healed, transformed men, and whatever, women and everybody. Our job is to make heaven where hell is found, and that's the action. So that's my commitment to this world, and I hope many of you are like that, and I know Bill is like that, and we know Illuman is all about making heaven where hell is found. So we thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. I thank my brother Bill. I own your story. You own my story.
Thanks.
We are brothers for life, and many of you on this call are our brothers as well, forever.
Yeah.
Peace.